Hello and welcome to the second webinar in the Connecting for Climate Change series from KTN. This session is part of KTN's programme of webinars exploring how we can convert the agreements from COP26 into reality, kickstarting the right conversations and collaborations following the Climate Change Conference. My name is Paul English, and it's once again my pleasure to be hosting today's event from my home here in Glasgow, and what I hope will be a very interesting, informative and inspirational session as we look back on the key outcomes of the Climate Summit here and ahead at how to make those ambitions a reality. The aim of these sessions is to bring together KTN's network of researchers, innovators and experts who help drive our global society and economy towards net zero. Our panelists will discuss the challenges we face and consider how we can best work together to achieve them. In just a wee minute, I'll introduce today's topic and guests, but before I do, a quick reminder that you can still register for the two remaining episodes in the series. You can also visit the KTN and Innovate UK websites to learn more about how to make the most of the network for your business. So, COP26 has come and gone here in Glasgow, the city which has delivered the Glasgow Climate Pact. While the news agendas have already moved on to some extent, the aims and ambitions of those 2 weeks here on the banks of the Clyde remain the focus of those working towards the commitments made. The headline outcomes: reducing the use of coal as an energy source, albeit phased down rather than phased out. Increase funding to help poorer countries deal with the effects of climate change and facilitate transitions to cleaner energy. China and the US agreeing to cooperate more around the switch to cleaner energy, and the pledge to bring an end to deforestation by 2030. So what insights have we gleaned from COP26? Who is doing what, and what commitments have been made? What do we need to do now to ensure that we can meet those commitments? Who is leading the way in tackling consumption-based emissions and transitioning to a circular economy? And what can we learn from them? Last week, our panel discussed decarbonisation, a session you can watch on the KTN YouTube channel. And this week, a new panel of guests are here to discuss the growth of circular economies. With that in mind, what's the challenge? Net zero is a major focus for government, industry and society, and rightly so. But as part of this transition, we will need to find innovative new models, systems and materials that move us away from linear value chains to those that are more circular. There is a growing commitment to achieving net zero, but there is still uncertainty on how we can achieve it and how we balance our innovation efforts on dealing with existing waste streams while moving towards earlier innovation to create new materials and adopt circular business models at scale rather than linear ones. A lot to consider, a lot to discuss, and to discuss all this today, please welcome our speakers. First of all, Emma McKenna, Head of Net Zero at KTN. Emma is passionate about sustainability and the circular economy and works across a range of projects that will positively contribute towards the UK's net zero ambitions. She works in collaboration with academics, industry and government to better understand the landscape and enable better opportunities. Welcome, Emma. Dr. Adam Reid, External Affairs Director at Suez Recycling and Recovery UK. Adam has been External Affairs Director at Suez Recycling and Recovery for over 4 years, and after a successful career in academia, local government and consultancy. For the last 2 years, he's been leading Suez's work with the UK government on the development of the new English Resources and Waste Strategy and associated consultations on extended producer responsibility, deposit return schemes and consistent collections. He's also worked with numerous local authorities on modelling, mapping and assessing policy reforms and likely impacts on material flows, composition and service provision. Hello, Adam. Emma Shaw, co-founder of the Library of Things. Library of Things is a community-led circular economy on a mission to make borrowing better than buying for people and planet. Library of Things makes it easy for people to save money and reduce waste by affordably renting useful items like drills, sewing machines and sound systems from local spaces and helping neighbours share practical skills. A winner of the Innovate UK Women in Innovation Awards 2020, Emma leads on business and impact. She led the development of the Library of Things' unique steward ownership, governance and funding model to balance profit with purpose. She works with London boroughs and local authorities to secure impact commissions for new Library of Things to develop shared social and environmental outcomes. Prior to the Library of Things, Emma joined the startup team of the Government Innovation Centre Future Cities Catapult. Hello, Emma. And Lloyd Brina, Senior Manager of the British Business Bank. Based in Cornwall, Lloyd works in the bank's UK network central team covering environmental, social and governance innovation projects. In addition, he represents the British Business Bank and the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Investment Fund, working across the small and medium enterprise finance ecosystem to drive connection and collaboration. He has a wide-ranging commercial background, having worked as a researcher, marketing manager, lawyer, innovation advisor, high-growth business coach, and knowledge exchange manager before joining the bank in early 2019. He has long been an enthusiast for purpose-driven businesses, financial innovation, and innovative business models. Hello to you, Lloyd. So, folks, welcome to the panel, welcome to our audience. Let's start by discussing your perspectives and some of the things that have come out of COP26. We're interested in whether commitments met your expectations or if there's anything that you think was missing or better than expected. Adam, could we start with you?
I'll unmute myself, shall I? Yeah, thank you, Paul. I guess it was interesting. I had low expectations, to be honest, going into COP. And I think the reason that Suez put so much effort into putting fringe events on and working collaboratively with the Aldersgate Group, Green Alliance, Re-London and the Chartered Institution of Waste Management was because we couldn't see circular economy, resource efficiency, waste management or consumption anywhere on the main agenda. And I think when you take that starting point, I was quite happy by the end of the 2 weeks. You know, we were seeing commentary by leading politicians from around the world that related to issues of consumption, albeit not as much as I would have liked, but they were still there. There was conversations and commentary around, you know, principles of circularity, even if the leading politicians don't quite get what circular economy is. They were certainly talking about circular business models, and they were certainly talking about consumers having to do the right thing. So, you know, my initial takeaway was I wasn't expecting a great deal. I probably got a little bit more than I could have hoped for. Some of the conversations were very positive, and I think the collaboration that was so evident in Glasgow is actually what's going to drive change. I think organizations have come away with a renewed commitment to do things together, and I'm less worried about government setting the bar high and driving the agenda. I think they've said the public sector, yes, we want more, but they've also said private sector, we're going to let you deliver. And I think that for me was my takeaway. We can get on with stuff, and we need to get on with stuff.
Yeah, great. Emma Shaw, how about you?
I think similarly, is it wrong that I had low expectations? It was an event which I didn't feel there was enough engagement, given that it was happening on, you know, UK turf. I didn't feel like the entrepreneurial community was engaged as enough as it should be in either getting there and sharing our views, or I suppose in the kind of narrative of what came out of COP. I think the headlines are important. I think those are the main takeaways that were needed, obviously with the disappointment around coal and other things. I think what's missing for me, I think, is a bit of a hang on. When do we really take stock? Like, when do we change the psychology of what we're all doing in the business world to go, actually, these kind of business models of I think, like, you know, a kind of very corporate view, it's not compatible with a planet with finite resources and climate change at the scale that it will be happening at. So I would have loved to see more conversation around governance. I probably would say that. You had my bio about how actually the role of business should be about solving problems first and balancing that with outcomes that benefit society and the environment. And I don't think that kind of narrative was really present, but for me, it's kind of like, it's fundamental to encouraging the right kind of innovation, encouraging the right kind of business leaders, encouraging the right kind of role of business in tackling the climate challenge.
Okay. Two fairly different points of view there. How about you, Lloyd?
Yeah, so I think something which may not have been evident from the sort of the day-to-day headlines in the programme, but something that I saw in my role at the British Business Bank, is that some of the nation's membership groups and certainly the business finance ecosystems, whether of any scale, were very much behind COP26, trying to have some kind of involvement, running webinars on various themes. There was a point within the COP26 fortnight when you couldn't move for another webinar on net zero journey type events, and I think there was a real enthusiasm within the ecosystem to see the agenda move forward. So I think that was a real positive. And we've seen all the key banks bringing out supportive strategies and resources that SMEs can tap into. We've seen fintechs, responsible lenders, venture capital groups all talking about impact investing and ESG, environmental, social and governance, being very high on their agendas. So I think that was probably a key sort of positive take for me. I do wonder at a personal level whether the journey to net zero is slightly overshadowing the huge opportunity or the huge need to have a more of a systems approach to how we move forward. So quite rightly and very positively, there's a big focus on what actions can people take and how can we reduce carbon to bring the temperature of the planet down, and the fact that buy-in and that wider interest in that really sort of number one priority for the planet is a great thing, but sort of slightly masked below that personal view is that the circular economy and a systems approach to making that happen could be higher on the agenda, I think.
Okay, thanks. And Emma, how about yourself?
Thanks, Paul. I think I'm going to split it into kind of, I suppose, what I saw were the positives and what I saw were kind of perhaps maybe the not so positives. I think on the not so positive side, it's, it was positive, just like, it was great that there was commitments being made, albeit that they were watered down by the end of that 2-week period. But I think the disappointing thing was we know on a high level what exactly it is that we need to do in terms of decarbonizing, and we need to, embrace the circular economy. But that kind of granularity around exactly how we're going to do it has still been unanswered. We engage with businesses every day who are really kind of starting to see that there is a need here to commit to net zero and to embrace it and think about how they're doing business and how their industry is operating, perhaps move kind of from the point of view that they need to build in resilience if they want to still be here in 10 years time. But that piece around how exactly it is that they achieve net zero, either within their own organization or within their own industry, that level is not there. So despite there being a commitment from perhaps business and from industry, how we achieve it is not there. And that leadership was really missing, I think, from COP. On the other side of that, though, however, I think kind of the coverage that COP got and the platform it was able to give to communities that are really at the moment actually already being significantly impacted by climate change, giving them their platform and making the ability to make those emotive pleas that we need action and we need it now can help bring around that sense of urgency that sometimes is missing from this conversation. And, aside from that, it's bringing kind of COP and sustainability and net zero into people's homes. The coverage that was kind of on TVs in the run up to COP was really great. It was letting people have the conversation and develop an understanding around a topic that kind of just seems a bit kind of far from them. I mean, I've been working in sustainability for years now. My parents still don't get it, but for the first time, they kind of started to think, actually, we understand what you're doing now. And I think that in itself has been a good thing, because we do need to engage with consumers and we need to help people change their behaviors and and embrace new business models, they need to understand why this is important. And I think, if anything, that's been a positive, that we've been able to kind of take something that seems a little bit kind of far removed from our day-to-day living, because we don't really see that kind of cause and effect of climate change perhaps here so much in the UK, but actually making it a little bit more real to them. So I think, if anything, that's at least one positive we can take from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I would share that anecdotal evidence myself, where, you know, I can say that my parents were engaged with a subject that previously would not necessarily have meant terribly much to them. I guess I'm quite interested off the back of your comments, Lloyd, about the kind of the wider buy-in, that there does need to be a move towards ensuring 1.5. Has the profile that COP has given specifically to the subject of the circular economy meant that moves into the wider buy-in? Are people understanding what circular economy means? I mean, I guess the most sort of, obvious representation effectively of that maybe in everyday life, Emma Shaw, is the world that you're involved in, and the world of trying to engage people in that. Are you seeing any change off the back of COP? Are people more engaged with what it is that your organisations are trying to do?
Is that for me directly and Lloyd as well?
It is for you, Emma, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought there was a delay there.
That's okay. I think primarily the reason people use Library of Things is to solve an immediate need in their life. You need a drill to put up a shelf. You want to connect with neighbours at a repair party. You want to feel like you're doing something. And I think what we offer is a hopeful narrative. Somebody said to us the other day, just knowing there's a Library of Things around the corner for me gives me hope, because it's relatable. And it's something that most people can benefit from and use in some way. But we know that the primary reason people use Library of Things is for affordability and convenience. Yep. So it's nearby to them. It's not maybe as easy as ordering something, a kind of cheap drill that you will break after the second use on Amazon. And really, our competitor is Amazon. How do you make borrowing better than buying? You need to be better than Amazon, and that's pretty hard. Yeah. To compete on price and convenience. But I think, what brings people in is convenience, and this is affordable and it's near me, and I want to support something like this. It gives me hope. And I think the reinforcing motivation is playing back the impact that small change in your consumption habit can make when collectively you look at it on the level of a neighborhood and multiple neighborhoods. So it's a reinforcing motivation. I don't think it's what brings people in the door. And I think people that seek out Library of Things, I think it will continue to be that way unless we solve the first problem of, helping people afford something and it being convenient. We can't have that environmental benefit. So we haven't seen a kind of spike in uptake of people borrowing things since COP, but it's always been there. And I think it will continue to reinforce the behavior change that happens kind of passively when people start engaging with Library of Things.
Adam.
I mean, I think it's a really interesting example. I mean, we've been working on reuse for 5, 6, 7 years now, and actually it's taken the same trajectory that we've seen with recycling, which is nice to have. People that are committed do it, but it's still minority. Then you get legislation, you get the framework in place. Suddenly you're making it, somebody's more accountable, not just the individual. And then your recycling rates rapidly start to cruise. Then they hit that plateau point, which is where we are now. Recycling is not the answer to decarbonisation, but it got us so far. And I think then you've got to go, now we need to make it even more easy, or you need to make everything else even harder. And I think, COP for me helped put some of this on the radar, but we were already doing it. I mean, we've been working on circular business models with our customers for years, but actually most of them aren't ready for it. It's too difficult. It's a leap of faith. It's a little hard to understand, and yet the reality is it's none of those, but there's a perception issue. And so you're going to work up examples and demonstrate those. What we need is a framework that enables those examples to become the norm, and then you can start to see the rapid improvement.
Yep. Emma McKenna.
Yeah, and I think just kind of building on what both Emma and Adam have said there, I think obviously convenience and the ease of being able to do it is super important. But one of the reasons perhaps we've reached that plateau is because we're actually not designing products with the end of their current life or their end of use in mind. And as a result, it makes it really, really difficult that when we no longer need something to actually take it apart, be able to capture the different materials within that to then be reused in something else. And that kind of comes back to the very kind of heart of circular economy, of the sense that we can't just continue to drag things out of the ground, use that to make something and then throw it away. We actually have to go back to the very start of that kind of the value chain and think about actually how we're designing things in the first place. Design that, you know, with the end of life and with the end of its use in mind, so that those materials can be captured. So, you know, as our needs change, you know, throughout the life of that product, then actually the product can change and adapt to meet those needs as well. And that's really, really important. And I think that also provides a little bit of a sticking ground for being able to actually implement circular business models with a bit more ease. Because actually, if we're, you know, renting, you know, particular products and tools and things like this, I'm sure, Emma, you've maybe seen this, how easy it is actually for the material, you know, the products that you're lending out to customers, for if it does break, how easy is it for you to actually to repair that in the first place, and the work that you've had to do to go back and work with the OEMs to actually think about how they're designing those products in the first place, so they're actually built for borrowing rather than buying, and built for multiple users and multiple uses. So I think that's a really important aspect as well, and design's a really, really important aspect of that. And how do we engage with the design community to help them work with industry and with, you know, different kind of service providers to embed that as well.
And is that level, you talk about, there's a step change involved then in working with the design community in order to effectively make materials that are more robust, that they can play a significant part in driving that circular economy. How far are we from that? And how much innovation do we need to put in place in order for us to be in that place?
I think design, what was your...
Emma McKenna, sorry, yourself.
Yeah. I think certainly, I think there is organizations that have design departments embedded within the organization, but then you also have organizations that will outsource design, and they're responding to a brief, and sometimes they don't know what they need to be asking for to be able to help develop their product to be circular. And also, as well as that, they're not really sure exactly at what point are they, how are they designing it? Is it for repair? Is it for reuse? Is it for remanufacture? There's different elements that you need to consider there as part of that. And I think, are the way that we're currently doing designs, does it allow for that flexibility and freedom for that to be embedded? It's not within Apple's business model for you to kind of easily be able to repair your phone. This idea of built-in obsolescence, it exists. So how do we actually then work with large companies like that to see differently about actually this business model of just selling at this mass production and mass sale of items is actually not the way forward? You can still have a thriving, business, but just adopting different business models around borrowing, around rental, around kind of subscription. So those two things need to go hand in hand. And I think we're starting to see elements of it. Caterpillar have been doing remanufacturing since the 70s, but how do we actually scale this up and, be able to take those learnings from one particular sector and apply it to other sectors that also need to address this as well?
Lloyd, just as you go to take a swig of coffee, I throw a question your way.
No, that's fine.
I suppose, the idea for that question came to me when you talked about, the buy-in for 1.5. Do you feel from your perspective that there is that buy-in? Has that buy-in changed post-COP for the perceptions and the drive towards creating a more kind of fluid circular economy?
I certainly think the buy-in has been hugely helped and ramped up, as others have said, talking about anecdotal evidence from their own families. So I think that's really helped. I suppose the point, just to carry on from what Emma was just saying, that there's a personal example, so not relating to my work at the bank at all, that I often quote in this space, and that's that I have a dryer. One of those things I shouldn't be using. I should be using the washing line, of course, but I do end up using a dryer. And after 3 years, 1 month, guess what happens? It goes wrong. And that happened just recently. And I have the exact same model sat there that I'd purchased 3 years, one month prior. So I don't want to own the thing anymore. I just want to pay somebody £25-30 a month, and I have a top quality, robust piece of machinery that will run 10 years without having a problem. And, maybe someone comes and fixes it after 10 years or whatever. So, and I suppose what I use that example because I think it relates to the whole concept of ownership. We are very wedded as a society to owning things. And, you can give the similar example when you talk about Apple laptops. And I think we are starting to see some movement from Apple now, Emma, on making things more repairable, but it has been terrible in the past. So that's another personal example. When I started my own business, however many years ago it was now, I had my own business for a while, innovation practice. And first thing I did was buy a MacBook Pro. Other laptops are available. And that was something I owned and was part of my business. And of course, after so many years, after 5 or 6 years, it started to run low on performance. And it was time to get a new one. And that's creating waste. Actually, what I found out, what I should have done, is that you can, as a business customer of Apple, you can lease a kit and you'll get it swapped out every 2 or 3 years for the latest bit of kit. They'll be taking the old one back and reusing, hopefully, all of those components. So, there are those approaches in life that we can all start to get our heads around. And I think those are the things that could be getting more airtime. I think everyone's bought into we need to get to 1.5 and reducing carbon. But personal view is we need to be thinking more widely, more systemically, and trying to get these examples of circular economy into the mainstream. I can see Emma's hand going up.
Emma, I'm gonna. Adam had his hand up just a second before you did, so I'm wondering. I'll come to you in a second. But Adam, if you'd a point that you wanted to raise.
Yeah, well, I'm just fully supportive. I mean, I think there are great examples. Lighting, more of us are now, buying the light and not buying the light bulb. Carpets. The problem is most of these opportunities are business related. They're not your average consumer. My mum doesn't go actively looking for the service. She goes looking for the product because, as Lloyd rightly said, we've been accustomed to and driven to buy stuff, and our esteem and our well-being has often been associated with what you own as opposed to what you enjoy. And I think that's something that we do need to have a proper conversation about across society is what is it that we want to be in the future? Do we want to still consume? Because if we do, we're going to have to consume differently, and we're going to have to understand the implications of consumption and the costs associated with it, the externalities of environmental impact. Or do we want to go back to a system that many of us can remember where things went round and round and they did get repaired and they were designed to be rented in the first place? And I think, that's a conversation that has to happen. But the question for me is, who is going to drive that conversation? Because do you trust the brands? Do you trust the academics? Do you trust government? I'm not sure which one of us is best placed to start the general conversation.
It starts here today, Adam. Emma Shaw, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just following this theme, I think obviously the central premise of Library of Things is that the burden of poor product design and the burden of ownership falls with the individual, whereas we really don't think that should be the case. In terms of brands, that's why, and quality, the best way we can assure we get products that are suitable for thousands of uses rather than just 1 or 2 uses is by partnering with companies like Bosch and with Karcher. Those are German manufacturing businesses that happen to be family owned and they have a very long-term horizon. And to the system change point that Lloyd made, I really passionately believe that something we've realized with Library of Things relevant to circular economy is that these companies don't exist in isolation. It's much more relational. It's much more of a collaborative type of model. And we realize actually that kind of elements we need to solve is not consumerism, but actually some of the flaws in capitalism as it is. And I think the ownership of companies themselves, where we have this Silicon Valley culture of starting a company, selling it in 5 years like a pair of shoes, is at the real heart of these business models that are driving short-term profitability over long-term outcomes. And that's why I'm such an advocate for alternative governance that locks in mission, it locks in patience, and it really incentivizes a business to promote the interest of stakeholders, not just short-term shareholder return.
I mean, what you're describing, I mean, others will know more keenly than I do, but it sounds to me like, it's turning an oil tanker. It's a big process. And I wonder if, picking up on one of some fact that I think we've all mentioned at some point, anecdotally, we've all mentioned older people in our worlds and their behaviours. So I wonder if the one of the optimistic points of view, or one of the things that we can be slightly more hopeful of, is that actually this is the work that's going to have to be taken on by a generation that is coming through behind the older people that we're using as anecdotal examples, and whether there's already a kind of sign that those generations are willing to embrace that just as much as they embrace brushing their teeth in the morning. I mean, is it? Am I wide of the mark to say that, Emma McKenna?
No, I don't think so. I think there's definitely a will and a willingness to be able to change. And I think certainly now, I mean, we've seen activism that's happened over the last couple of years within the UK and across the world that's really actually kind of ignited some of that government action to be taken. And I think that's really, really positive. I think some of the challenges that we have is there is definitely a will and a willingness, is that sometimes we're, as you say, this kind of like this moving a kind of big ship, is that we're working with companies like Emma's, like Library of Things, which is a shining light example of circular economy as a business, and having that at the heart of it, trying to adapt and to grow and to scale in what is a linear system. And if we really want to do that, it's going to be bringing together all the different kind of parts of the puzzle to allow that to happen. And no business, as Emma says, operates in isolation. So it's really important that we kind of create a platform and environment where organizations can work together and work seamlessly to be able to implement the circular models, and then as such engage with customers and have the right messaging. But I think sometimes the messaging does get lost. Greenwashing is a thing. And sometimes what happens is that consumers are very trusting, and they will kind of think, oh, well, they're saying this is green and this is eco, so we're going to go with that. We've seen everything that's happened with plastics in the last couple of years, and then businesses adopting something that hasn't actually been any better. It's just been a single use replacement for an alternative product or an alternative material. And as a result, we're having, these unintended consequences and impacts. And that's going to be something I think that's going to turn consumers off, or they're not going to know who to trust or where to turn or what the right option is. So I think there's definitely a role there to do a lot more in the education piece, and to bring everyone on the journey together as well, and to not kind of point fingers and saying, oh, you're actually doing this wrong, because that's just going to turn people off completely. And we definitely don't want to do that. I think no one's got it all figured out. So let's try and go on this journey and learn together. So, yeah.
I guess one of the sort of bellwethers of progress in this subject might be, something as everyday as the recyclable or compostable coffee cup. I think it was Manchester City that brought out the drinkable, the edible coffee cup a few weeks back. Which reminded me of the little cups in the Willy Wonka movie where they drank at the end. It's been hiding in plain sight all this time. I wonder, until we see things like that touch our every day, and those kind of like those very kind of transient moments that are almost, they're vapor in our day. They're not the memorable moments. They come and they go, and we don't really remember them. But it's until we actually maybe find those changes happening on that almost subconscious level, I think that will be the point where maybe we start to figure that this is now embedded in our everyday. Emma Shaw.
Just thinking about the edible coffee cup. I think I'm torn, because I struggle with the fact that the same psychology we have in terms of a coffee cup that you buy, the coffee shop has bought them manufactured cheaply, and then you buy it as a consumer and you throw it away because what else you can do with it? There's no other purpose. I struggle with just substituting in cool products to that same culture. And I think it comes from the fact that it's so hardwired, this linear thing. And it's quite industrial, and it's quite mechanistic, and there's an input and there's a process and there's an output. And that is so embedded in, especially in funding. So when you look at innovation funding, for example, it is very much input, process, output, and that's how innovation happens. I don't think it's that aligned to these kind of circular business models in the same way. I think it needs a very different psychology. My hope, I suppose, is that I really believe in the power of entrepreneurial energy for solving problems. I believe there is thousands of examples of business founders with the cool, quirky idea, whether it's the coffee cup or something a bit more systemic than that, that needs access to early stage funding. And I believe that one of the main barriers to that is access to funding for a diversity of founders. So you might be aware of the Alison Rose Review of Female Entrepreneurship, which sadly broke the news that just 1% of early stage venture funding goes to women-led companies. This is very anecdotal. I just believe that women, a kind of feminine leadership, is one of the ways to have a more balanced approach with business and balancing these kind of multiple stakeholders. And an amazing thing would be to open up access to more early stage funding and innovation grants to business models that don't look like they currently do.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on that point with you, Lloyd, in a second, but I notice, Adam, you were shaking your head on that particular comment.
Always. I mean, I completely agree with Emma. I mean, the point is, what problem are we trying to solve? And it's actually consuming on the go is the problem. It's not the coffee cup. And the idea of eating a coffee cup, surely you're going to be thirsty at the end of it and then buy another one, which just seems to me a ludicrous solution. We've got reusable coffee cups. I mean, I walk around with my metal ones or my heavy duty plastic ones. They get used hundreds of thousands of times. I mean, That's the answer. We just need to make that the norm. And I think let's not try and create another issue, which is ultimately going to have unintended consequences that none of us have thought about, because none of us have thought about it. And I think let's focus on quality material, long lifetime, durability, repairability. These are all things that my mum gets. These are things that my son should understand. And I think it's our job to make sure they become the norm.
Lloyd, I guess from a business perspective, what incentives need to be in place in order for businesses to want to actually, engage with us?
It's an interesting question, Paul. I think there's a lot. It's one of those questions that's easy to ask, and it's quite a big thing to try and answer. And I probably can't speak for. I probably can't speak to exactly what incentives are needed. I think that's probably for the rest of the panel to have a chat about. But certainly, the need for financial incentives or for some kind of help for SMEs has been highlighted in our research at the British Business Bank. So it was we did some research into the SME finance ecosystem earlier in the year within the team which I work in, which is the UK network. So it's a network of field managers effectively. And it did come through really quite strongly that probably on the back of a bit of a recent history of funding being in place for green initiatives and carbon reducing initiatives in the not too distant past, and allied to that, we've done some more recent research direct with SMEs that show cost and feasibility are the biggest barriers to taking actions on the net zero journey within SMEs, and that's quite significant and probably goes back to where your question is coming from. And I think it's something that we do need to have a solution to, and we do need to move forward with. And we have seen lots of good positive sort of forward motion, which I'll talk to in a moment. But it's important because the sorry, I've lost my train of thought a little bit now.
Okay, well, I mean, if I'm interested in what you just said there about this, forward motion. If you want, if you want to pick up on that, if you tell us, some of
So I will pick up on that. So we've seen within the finance ecosystem a huge recognition of the opportunity. Thank you, Paul. And so we've seen across the whole, all different sizes within the finance ecosystem, lenders, venture capitalists, all the different players in the system, all expressing an enthusiasm for ESG, as we call them, environmental, social and governance type investments, that producing impact reports. And it's something which is going to become a bigger and bigger feature when you apply for finance as an SME. I remember where I was going with my other train of thought, and it's that SMEs in the UK account for 50% of our business related emissions. So it's an important area for us to be focusing on, really sorting this out and helping SMEs on this journey, which again is where your sort of financial incentives question is coming from. Another area of positivity, though, is around the nation's innovative companies. And I think there's a real opportunity actually for startups. And one of our products is startup loans. And we've seen a real increase during the pandemic, the early stages of the pandemic last year, through to the end of last year and beyond, with a lot of enthusiasm for people starting new businesses. And that space where you're going into a world where things can change allows new innovative ways of thinking. A startup can be much more nimble than the sort of super tanker structures that we've been talking about. So there's the fact that we've identified everyone sees opportunity in this move, and the fact that this is a great country for having a startup, I think sort of bodes quite well. And there's an element of, if you're in business right now, well, if you don't do it, then probably you're going to have a competitor doing it quite soon. And when you next go to get finance, you're going to be asked questions about your level of commitment to people and the planet. I think the world's moved on from when it was just all about profit, and it's very firmly that triple bottom line of people, planet, profit nowadays.
Great, thanks, Lloyd. Emma Shaw, I wonder, does that must sound very encouraging to hear that.
It's encouraging. I mean, I'm kind of, I don't disagree. I just think it's more than that. Sorry, my headphones have just run out of battery. Come back to me in a minute.
No problem. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question. And this is something that occurs to me anecdotally. We talk about businesses and we talk about, the incentivization of, committing to the circular economy as part of their business model. And I remember and this is pre-COP, I remember being aware of the fact that IKEA were offering effectively a refund on old pieces of furniture, and they would recycle or resell in some cases. And indeed, the IKEA in Glasgow now has a little kind of sub shop selling reconditioned IKEA out of date content. I wonder to what extent that needs to be seen to be, because that's effectively putting that on the high street. The shops that the thrift stores round about where I live in Glasgow are not necessarily on the high street. They're in the kind of the cooler parts of town where certain people will gravitate towards. Do we need to have these things on the high street? Is IKEA a good example of how to do that, or is it greenwashing? Adam?
I don't think it's greenwashing, because what IKEA have done and others have recognised that their responsibility and potentially their business model is at risk if they don't start to make this transition, because they're going to get hammered by carbon costs and carbon taxes. They're going to get an increasing public backlash that says you're not doing enough, and that's going to affect their bottom line. So I think what they've seen is the writing on the wall, and they've decided to innovate early. What they can do is, because of the nature of their business, is they can encourage people to do this in a way that works. And I've been highly impressed with what they do, because they're doing on the high street what we're doing at Suez at the tip. People bring furniture down to us and we capture it before it goes in the waste stream, and we then help repatriate that either to people that haven't got as much money, or people that are cool and hip, taking your point. But again, we're not on the high street, so many of today's consumers wouldn't necessarily utilize our access or our facilities. So I think we need multiple entry points, and anybody that wants to be on the high street or is a big brand or has a huge customer loyalty, I think they've got to take their responsibility seriously, and I think this is proving the point, and I think others will follow, and that can only be good in terms of access and normality.
Thanks, Adam. Emma McKenna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Adam. I think it's a great initiative, and I think that we need to kind of see more of this happening. Where we see these take back schemes happening with other brands. And I think the high street is changing. You know, I think if anyone was to walk through their local high street at the minute, I certainly know where I'm based at. And even kind of when I was home last week in Derry, so much of the high street is sadly derelict and just kind of left to ruin, because the businesses that kind of thrived pre-pandemic and aren't thriving anymore, and the customer demand and kind of our public perception is changing, and so is our shopping behaviors as well. And I think there's a real opportunity here to kind of use the high street to engage again with communities and bring back services that are required, that perhaps we don't necessarily have the skills for at home, that lend themselves to a circular economy, like repair, like remanufacture, like these take backs and resale schemes. Perhaps they can take a place on the high street that's now derelict and empty. So I think that definitely is something. And I think, as far as I'm aware, you know, with a lot of these brands that are implement these take back schemes, what they've realized actually is that sometimes what they're getting back isn't fit for purpose to then be resold in their current condition. And so that's taking them back to that drawing board again of design and thinking about how they can repurpose this as well. So I think it's an exciting time, and I think it's great that the bigger brands are starting to kind of take this responsibility. And I hope that, you know, as part of this process, they are talking to the likes of Suez and other waste management companies to understand actually what waste streams are appearing and what they can't deal with and what they can't tackle at the moment, and what needs to be done to kind of change that and adapt. And those conversations are so important. It's not, you know, it's no longer the case where you can just kind of pump something out and then forget about it. That extended producer responsibility is so important. And it's either take a stand and step up and assume that responsibility now, or be, you know, penalized for it much later because of public perception and because of, you know, potentially new legislation which is going to adversely impact you.
Yeah. Emma Shaw, you've got your headphones recovered. Did you want to continue your point, or has the moment passed?
I think I could talk about it all day. So I think, yeah, I suppose in a personal experience and that of our peers is access to startup funding is the most difficult step to take, and related to business models around reuse and repair and bringing new life to our high streets and relevant businesses that we all want to see. The big barrier there is, you know, if you spend all of your trading income on extortionate rents and rates, it's quite difficult to make those kind of place-based businesses thrive currently. So yeah, those are my two takes on what's just been said. Okay,
thanks. Emma McKenna, you had something to add there?
Yeah, and I think it was Emma Shaw that brought this to my attention and my old team's attention, is that for startups like Emma's and others that are developing these new, well, not new, but kind of energizing or reinvigorizing these rental models, as a startup, having to be able to have access to things like SEIS. You're not able to have that if you have a rental model, which means at the heart of kind of a government scheme that's there to design, or it's there to kind of really kind of encourage funding and investment into startup and startup innovation, by not being able to be SEIS accredited or registered because you have a rental model, means it's fundamentally flawed in a way that doesn't encourage circular economy innovation. So that in itself is having a negative impact on being able to kind of actually attract investment into circular economy innovation and startups that operate in a similar way to Library of Things and others that are really trying to kind of bolster and promote this rental model. So there's other aspects beyond kind of the products that are available, but also sometimes they're not necessarily suitable or compatible with the types of business models that the circular economy are really all about.
Yep. I guess I notice, again, from my own, view of the world, that, I just referred to Adam a second ago as, there are cool thrift stores round about not too far from where I live. But I can go on Instagram now and I can see someone showing me a £700 handbag that they either desire or have bought. We live in an Instagram world. We can't get parked in the streets out here because people used to drive small cars. Now they drive SUVs. And there is a real duality to, I think, what people almost want to, the lifestyle that they want to forward and the lifestyle that they want to show, and perhaps even an internal struggle in terms of the life that they want to be leading and the message that they are receiving in terms of what the better life needs to be in order to achieve 1.5 in order to live in a circular economy? How do we overcome that in an Instagram generation? Who wants to take that on? We've got 2 minutes. Adam.
Go on. By getting the right influencers, because Instagram is all about people with connectivity. So let's showcase great lifestyles and great kit that's repurposed, reused, refurbed. It doesn't all have to be new. It doesn't have to be big. I just think we need to showcase alternatives and set it in the context of this is how we look after our children and our children's children. It needs context.
Anyone else for that one? Emma Shaw.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Lloyd.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think there's part of the work that we do really is highlighting, and will be doing certainly, is highlighting strong case studies, and Instagram is one of the channels for that. It's in a similar vein to what Adam just said, really. I mean, we certainly look to promote and highlight businesses that are carbon reducing, businesses that are doing disruptive, innovative things, exciting businesses that have raised finance and are doing, making good progress. We like to highlight those examples for others to learn from. So we'll carry on doing that, I think.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, a couple of quick questions. We're living in very peculiar times at the moment. There are all sorts of different forces at play, and they have made life very different from the life that we have been used to leading. We have a supply chain disruption at the moment that we're seeing, from crisps to, house building. What is that teaching us at the moment, Emma Shaw?
Fragility, I guess. This might be going off a bit on another. The financial crisis was a bubble that was we kind of held up all this mortgage. I won't go into detail, but part of me thinks the supply chain bubble that we've had for the last 5-10 years is not sustainable. The thought of on-demand everything is not sustainable, and I suppose we're seeing the reality of a system that was propped up by lots of kind of optimistic structures that have had a shock of a global pandemic and the shock of a big disruption in trade, especially, for the UK, that is now we're going to experience the fallout of that. And I suppose I think it's a reminder that you can't just get on demand everything you want whenever you want it. That it comes from somewhere and there's provenance in that, and it, can it reconnect us to the fact that there's somebody making our socks in Portugal and it's going to take 2 months to get here. I think we're kind of seeing that, and I don't know a single small business that hasn't been impacted in quite a major way by this supply chain disruption. And it's much more than turkeys and staffing for lorries and other things. It's sort of every business owner that I know is dealing with this, and it's quite a hidden problem, and I think it's a bubble that is bursting.
Adam?
Oh, tough question. Great way to end. I don't know. I suppose I'm with Emma on this one. I think everything comes at a cost, and I think if you put the cost into the system, you can let consumers make their own decisions about whether something that's on demand 24/7 is actually valuable or cost effective. And I think we do need to, showcase, as Lloyd's rightly said, showcase the alternatives, because good practice can quickly become the norm if people go, well, that's accessible and I like it. And I think, not everybody thought that Amazon or Netflix were going to be, winners on day one, did they? But now they're, dominating society. And I think we just need to make some of this cool refurb, reuse, repair, buying the experience as opposed to buying the product, the norm. And I think that is something that we have to do if we're serious about net zero.
Great, Adam. Thank you very much, folks. It's been a pleasure. It's been very interesting for me. I hope it's been very interesting to you guys as well as our audience today. That is unfortunately all we have time for. I hope you've enjoyed our second session in the series, Connecting for Climate Change, Unleashing Innovation Post COP26. Today's session has been about circular economy, and you can catch it and our other session on decarbonisation again on the KTN YouTube channel. There are 2 more sessions that we'll follow up with on the 1st of December on resilient places and the 8th of December on enabling action. You can visit the KTN website on www.ktn-uk.org to register. But for now, we are out of time. Thanks very much, folks. Goodbye.